Hi, I'm Theo, and these broadcasts are to support the blogs on nomorec.com's website as well as the online classes. In this episode, we begin our four-part series on the Jubilee. Welcome back to another broadcast at nomorec.com's YouTube channel. Today we're going to discuss just a brief introduction, I guess, into the Jubilee. I say brief with my tongue in my cheek because the Jubilee is such a concept that is just overwhelming for me and is so powerful and deserves much more attention than these short videos can do. So, much of this research is inspired by the materials from James Bijan of Tyndale, with his permission to use them freely, so I thank him right off the top. And before we dive in too much further, I would like to highlight that for further studies of economics in the New Testament, one can see Nathan Eubank from Notre Dame, who has done much to help us decipher more biblical economics rather than some of the modern twists and takes that have occurred in the past few centuries that focus more on medieval concepts or modern concepts to understand economics that are centuries far. Well, let me say this. We're trying to understand economics from millennia ago when we're using that, our understanding that is based on what's happened in the century. So I did want to pull him out. But anyway, the Jubilee, the word, the term, the concept primarily appears only in 3 chapters of our Bible, from Leviticus 25, 26, and 27. Obviously, this is the Levitical law, and I know that most people find the book of Leviticus challenging and find it rather useless, and most New Testament believers are even given the impression that one can just ignore the book of Leviticus and all the Levitical laws, and so how I describe it myself is it's like, I guess, with again my tongue-in-cheek pun intended, those who have explained to me what it's like eating lobster, although that's not kosher. It's a delicacy and it takes lots of work, but it's worth it according to them. I've never eaten lobster, so I don't know. But I have tasted and seen the goodness of God in the book of Leviticus, and would love to do more of these videos when given time. Been trying to focus on Genesis, but someone wanted me to do some research into the Jubilee, and so hence we're getting some videos on the Jubilee. So I would like to say it's a transformative declarative enactment of restoration, combining the ritual and sacred to be realized with the most marginalized of society. And, in the ancient world, what applies to the least applies to all in law. And so if it applies to the least, it should then, give us an idea what it applies in every area. So it's very interesting how to do that. And I don't want to get much deeper into biblical law because that's a journey in and of itself. So in the period in creation, we have 7 periods of time. And so the focus then in ritual and in beginning of Genesis, we have this idea that God created the sun, the moon, and stars to be our calendar, to be guides to the festival aspects of religious life, that in the ritual, as I argue in my dissertation in the 2nd chapter, the idea of ritual is to get us into ways that we can actually connect our world with the world that is above or below, I guess, in some sense. So that supernatural realm that most find very difficult. And so we have this idea of there's 7 days per week, and that's the Sabbath. And we get that from Genesis 1 and 2. The days of creation are defined as 7 days. We're not going to get into the specifics of that either, not in this video. But you have 7 time periods, just for simplicity's sake. And it ends up being 7 days that form the week that forms Israelite society, where they work for 6 days and have the 7th off. And then you have 7 years in what's known as a week of years in Leviticus 25, verses 1 to 8, where the land is given a rest, or it's a Sabbath year. And we can look at Exodus 23, verses 10 to 11 for that. So what's a Jubilee then? Well, Jubilee is something special. It's 7 sevens. Okay, it's 7 squared. And Leviticus 25:8. So it's 7 of these 7 sevens. So it's kind of tricky, but what is the Bible trying to say? It's trying to use superlative. So something that, good, better, best, so 7 and then 7er and then 7est, the most 7. So, and it's interesting if you think about festivals, even our festivals, anyone that celebrates how often these festivals are. And, if you're a Christian and Christmas time is once a year and it's the most wonderful time of the year, but you have to wait every year for that. Well, this is something that occurs only once every 49 years. So you shall count 7 weeks of 7 years, 7 times 7 years. So at the time of the 7 weeks of years shall give you 49 years. Now, there's lots of confusion here, because the year of Jubilee is the first and the last of the cycle. So it is the first, and it is the 50th year in the cycle. Entails 49 years. In other words, it occurs every 49 years. It's not on 50s, as some say. So the first year of the Jubilee is Jubilee number 1, and then 49. But then when we get to the last, that's also the first of the new cycle. It begins and ends each cycle, and has this unique double meaning, so that it pulls off this idea representing new birth, even as we have the old passing away, the new is coming, all at the same time. And so it has this unique understanding. So there's lots of confusion and lots of scholars that go different ways with understanding it. But the primary way I look at it is it's 49 years, every 49 years. So the Sabbath year out of Exodus 23, 10, and 11, this presents some problems for us, and I think Christopher Wright is very helpful in his articles in the Evangelical Quarterly Journal, parts 1 and 2 on what happened every 7 years, tries to help, sort this out. And so we have 7 years, so 6 years of harvest. And it's described in Leviticus 25:21 as the 6th year, and then it's such a harvest. It's kind of like the Sabbath. You go out every day on the Sabbath, and you collect your manna, and you make your food from that manna for 5 days. On the 6th day, you go out and you collect, enough to get you through the 6th day, and also enough for the 7th day, because if you go out on the 7th day, you will not get. And if days 1 through 5, you keep anything extra, the next morning it's going to be bad. Whereas day 6, you keep extra, and it's okay on the 7th day, and you get through. Well, the idea here is the harvest on the 6th year extends all the way through, and is such a good crop that you eat it in the 7th and 8th year, while the crops in the 8th year that you farmed are waiting to be harvested. So you have to plant those, because you're not harvesting in the 7th year. No one farms the land in the 7th. Now the poor eat from the spared lands, while those who have eat of their own. So this is the idea, because according to Wright, it's most likely practiced in a rotational approach. Okay, so that's the practice. So it's not like it's very difficult, but if we understand it as meaning that it's the entire land resting every 7th year and no farming is happening, that could be difficult way to do it. It could be that the each farmland, each tribe takes sections of the land and lets it rest 1 out of those 7 years and rotates. And basically you leave the land fallow. That's the idea, that you leave the land fallow, and then whatever grows on it is for anyone to consume. whether it be the owner of the land or the poor people or animals or anyone's allowed. You just leave it untouched and it's for all to eat. And so it gets kind of confusing. Leviticus 23:22 says, "And when you reap the harvest of your land, and you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, nor shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and the sojourner. I am the Lord your God." So this passage in Leviticus describes a law that you do not harvest your entire field, and you only get to go through it once. You don't get to go back through a second time for anything you might have missed, because you're leaving that for the poor. So the poor have that. And so, but we're talking about a Sabbath year here, which is, the Sabbath year is a leveler. The poor are not restricted just to these corners of the field. Rather, the benefits of the land are open and up for everyone to enjoy. The rich and the poor, for the slave and the free, the man and the beast alike, everyone. However, no work is done in planting, only each is allowed to take whatever they want, whatever the land gives on its own. So, now, what we discussed in Exodus 23:10 and 11, "For 6 years you shall sow your land and gather its field, but the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat, and whatever they leave, the beasts of the fields may eat. You shall do likewise with your vineyard and with your olive orchard." Okay, so here in the Exodus count, the concern seems to be more for the poor, those people, and not the land. And that the poor are allowed not only the corners, but also the fallow lands, while the balance of society eats from their own land. So this again is if it's done on the rotational means. So each year you leave one part of your inheritance free, and you do not farm it, and you just leave it fallow. And then when you harvest your crops, obviously, then you harvest them and you leave the corners for the poor, but then that fallow ground is also for the poor. So the poor would have access to some land in any part of Israel at any given time and be able then to partake. So everyone eats in this sense. So those who are blessed to have their own land with crops eat what they produce from their fields. Those who do not can go to the corners of the fields and also to these open fallow fields. Okay, and they can eat them. So this is more described as a law that is based on the individual. And it's akin to what happens in Exodus 21, verses 1 through 11. So, describing what occurs every 7 years of an indentured servant who's gone through financial difficulty and can indenture themselves. If they don't have, say they fall into financial difficulty and they don't have land because they've already given that away, they can even give themselves away and sell their labor. But after 7 years, they're allowed to be free. So this is more individualistic, the individual. Whereas Leviticus 25, the focus here is in the context of the Jubilee. And, so some are leaning toward this being a different command. Okay, this is a different command. It's not one command spoken twice, where you can take these two verses in Exodus and Leviticus and just kind of bring them together. No, it's actually maybe two different proclamations. And this is the context of the Jubilee, where all are equalized and all are eat freely of the land, like it's back in Eden. The animals, the humans all eat freely. There's no sense of private property here. The focus here is on giving the land, though, a rest, as in the Sabbath, so it too does not have to work. There's this connection that I argue for in my dissertation called the Adamic principle, where you have a connection between earth and earthlings. The land is not Israel's slave to do as they wish it, okay? It must be respected and not sinned against for their own selfish, evil, vain gain. Scholars remain, though, uncertain exactly how, or even if all of this was practiced logistically. Again, we don't have evidence to support. So there's no evidence one way or the other, to prove or disprove this as merely idealistic or realized practically. This passage specifically addresses a corporate Israel. Remember how the Exodus passage was individual. This is addressing a corporate Israel and what they as a nation are responsible to do, ensure all have means in times of distress to stand together for the good of all as God's stewards over the entire creation. However, there's a bit of uncertainty how these two passages could be aligned if one wants to take them as a single command. They appear, as I said earlier, to be two separate commands in two different contexts, reflecting similar thinking while offering varied theological approaches, even as each espouses a differing way to achieve the same goal. So it's kind of a mix there. The Jubilee, then, all may eat of what the land gives freely in the Jubilee as an equalizer. No one owns the land, and that's the point we're going to get to later. It's not owned by anyone. There's no idea of private property, inheritance rights here. All is reset to its original inheritance to restore order when life's chaos attempts to disrupt the cosmological ordering. It's a picture of realizing what took place back in the beginning in Genesis chapter 1 and 2 and trying to restore that as much as possible. And so the creation of Israel as a people and as a nation out of Abraham mirrors what God did in humanity and Adam. So, it's this rhythm that we keep talking about that's in the Pentateuch, in the Bible, that God continues to bring order out of chaos, as chaos is out there, ever on the horizon, ever wanting to break into our wonderful, peaceful civilization, and chaos comes in the form of the pandemic or whatever into our lives, and we have to deal with it, and we have to tame it, we have to order it. Something theologians call chaos conf. Anyway, now there's some exemptions. Houses within the city's walls only could be loaned for 1 year and do not revert but go to the new owner if left unpaid. But the Levites, though, can redeem regardless at each Jubilee. Levitical families never lose their rights, even inside city walls. So there was, this idea of the land and agricultural more so outside of cities, prior to the city-state kind of thing going on. We hope you've enjoyed the first part of our just brief survey on the Jubilee. I know it's 4 parts, and it doesn't even do it justice because there's so much more, but at least maybe in these 4 videos you'll get a broad understanding and cause you to go deeper into the study of this concept that's important and underlies a lot of what we do at our channel. Be sure to come back and join us for more episodes on the Jubilee. Thank you very much, and God bless you for listening. Stay tuned for more episodes in videos to help you with your journey from nomorec.com.